Glenn,
Hello.
missed you the last couple weeks.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been so much happening. Finally, a weekend off. So, yeah. So, what's been going on? I just saw a little bit of last week uh, where you hadn't been able to attend all the time, I believe.
Well, that's because last week was when I said goodbye to my golden retriever, Zeus.
Oh,
That was a very hard veterinarian appointment that I had to go to with him.
oh, I can imagine. Yeah. He's been with you for many years, hasn't he?
8.5 years, yes.
8.5 years. Yeah. Yeah, that is quite a lot of time. Yeah, we have a cat here. She's been with us for about 4 years, 5 years actually. So yeah, it's such a close relationship one gets with these animals.
Yeah, you
But
spend more time with them than you do most humans in your life. You know.
yeah, it's great. I mean, I just think it's a great thing for people to have animals. It's good for the animals. It's good for us. It's just yeah, we should do more of it.
In fact,
Well,
since we're waiting for other people here, I'm going to make way here and show you my cat is actually right behind me.
oh, hello there.
So this is Lucifer. This is my 1098. So he's 11 years old now. And I found him when he was a baby and abandoned by his family and mother. So his eyes were not even open yet. And so I took him home, and now he's a robust 14 or 15 pound cat, and he's 11 years old now.
11 years, huh? You're quite a veteran already there, Lucifer. Hello, Lucifer.
Anyway, I'll let him go back.
Oh, look, so peaceful. Yeah, really peaceful.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And how's it going otherwise? Is it interesting to be back coding again,
Well,
developing things?
yeah, definitely. It's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying that. And my responsibilities at work are still shifting in a good way. I am coding more. I'm being asked to participate more on the front end of customer engagements, which I really enjoy. Um, I was asked to give a talk in Chicago last Tuesday, so that was kind of fun. Yeah, so those are a nice mix of responsibilities that are enjoyable and not too stressful, although the talking was a little bit stressful.
Yeah, talking is always challenging. Yeah. But yeah, and it must be interesting also to be working on developing things, solutions, because that was more theoretical kind of creative work that you hadn't been doing for a few years.
Yeah, in fact, it had been too long since I was back in the actual bits of software. But, I really enjoy it because right now there's so much out there. As I mentioned last week, that a lot of my time when I'm developing stuff is just looking for other packages that I can incorporate because they do most of what I need. So that
Yeah,
looking around and incorporation and integration and that's very different than what coding was 20 or 30 years ago. So it's
so fascinating because I've never uh, learned any of the programming languages or done any programming. But I've been very interested in information more from a philosophical point of view. And it's sort of through a different journey, it's brought me to an interest in trying to learn a little bit more about what's happening. people are programming, and what about designs, and not just with computers, but maybe in a more general sense, the science of architectures, the science of ways of doing things. And so, but obviously programming is, I mean, one way of creating possibilities for perhaps machines to do interesting things, and then obviously machines and humans together to do interesting things.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's very, very interesting to learn about it. And but would you say then that a part of it is that there's so much knowledge out there, it's overwhelmingly much, so it's a lot to really find what's most relevant in a sense, and put it together in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, for example, just a plethora of open source projects. If you look at anything, there's going to be dozens, if not thousands, of open source projects, and then some of them will be very active. Some of them will be basically, school projects that got abandoned with almost no activity. So sifting through all that and learning how to make sense out of it, and then learning what assumptions went into each of those packages that may or may not make them compatible or incompatible with what myself or yourself or oneself is trying to do. That has a lot to do with how you integrate other people's work. So integrating other people's work is a craft that I'm learning now, because there's just so much out there, and everything has a different genesis, a different reason for being, a different set of assumptions, a different set of restrictions or constraints. Um, so that is fascinating to learn about, so that you can actually put together the right pieces and have the right results. It's also interesting, by the way, that you say you want to get into more science. Do you know about notebooks, in particular Jupyter notebooks?
No, I don't know about that. I've only really been using Evernote quite a lot, and
Okay,
I've only used a
it's
few of
it's pretty
Evernote.
static, right? You just put static snippets of things into Evernote, so it's just basically like a note bucket that you can just put things into.
Yeah,
But
it's
what's
like a
interesting,
very good, yeah, nose bucket. Yeah.
there's an interesting development, I think pioneered by Wolfram Mathematica 30 or 40 years ago, but now quite popular in the data science world. These things called notebooks. So notebooks are essentially live executable documents where they can have explanatory content, but they can also have pieces of executable code that can then run data and then can give you visualizations, and then you yourself can go and modify that if you need. So say, hey, I don't like this assumption. Let me change this parameter to something I like, or let me now add another step here where the original document went from step 1 to step 2. Maybe you want to put in step 1.5 to make a better result. That's really fascinating. So this notion of notebooks as a way to communicate knowledge and present data and to extract insights is really fascinating. So I'm learning that myself, because what I was trying to do with this global sim project, Jupyter notebooks might be well along the way toward doing that. So I'm quite impressed by what they're doing.
Whoa, I gotta check that out. Jupyter Notebooks. So is
Yes,
that an app for phone, for tablets? Is it?
it's almost for anything, but it's really, since you're looking at a lot of data, usually a bigger screen is recommended. So Jupyter, by the way, is spelled Jupyter, because it uses Python. So py part of it comes from Python. And if you would just look,
What
it's
did
one
you say? What you say? How is it spelled?
Jupyter.
Jupyter. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
In fact, if you really want to get started with that, I would recommend you start with something called Anaconda, Anaconda, which installs very easily, and then it will install Jupyter for you.
Ah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated how good a job these people have done.
But this global sim idea, that's also something I was wondering about. I mean, it would be fun to do some co-visioning and look into some of that stuff, maybe in today's call, or, I think it's good. But it's really interesting with, if we could have a simulation
Yeah.
of global events in real time where you know where people are, resources are, and you can really design win-win situations between people and really value maximization systems where resources are used with phenomenal efficiency and synergy and beauty and harmony, and those are the kind of things that, yeah, that's what I would want to really look into.
So, Glenn, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you remember Global Sim because you actually are quite receptive to other people's ideas. That's one of the things I really appreciate about you. I was preparing a different version of an outline that I presented maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and so if you are willing and patient, I'd love to be able to walk through that outline with you and see what you think of it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to share my screen now. In fact, one particular application window, so you can follow along here. So let me share and pick the right app. Where is it? There we go. I got it. Okay, now, do you see my workflowy app?
Yep. Yep.
So I've structured it right now into 6 bullets, and I'm sure I'm not done yet. So this is only the current form of it, okay? So the question I'm trying to answer is, what are we doing here in the GCC, especially here in barn raising? What are we trying to do? So I think the way I'm thinking about this, let's see, who just joined?
Yeah, Alex and Colin. Yeah.
Okay, hey, Alex. Hey.
So Sam's showing us. Yeah, this is super interesting.
Let me welcome Alex and Colin, and then uh, maybe possibly restart. Let me just stop this. Hey, Colin, Alex, I don't know how much of that you heard, but I'm trying to walk through an outline that I presented maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I've got a different rev of it now. So I've added a couple other bullets to it. So unless you guys want to optionally check in, I'd like to jump into it, but we can always start with an optional round of check-ins.
Yeah, keep going.
All right. Alex, you good, or you want to do a check-in? All right.
I think you should keep going. Yeah.
All right, cool. Let me reshare that screen. The way I'm thinking about this right now is the question is, what are we here to do in the GCC, especially in barn raising? Okay. So to me, doing anything requires that we share some notion of where we're going. And that's this co-visioning piece, right? What's that world we want to live in? What are those values that we really want to express in our lives and in our actions? What kind of place do we want to co-create for ourselves and our future generations? And then what do we need to do to bring that about? Okay. Now, there's a lot of things, but one of the fundamental pieces is coexistence. And I've talked about that before, Colin. I really appreciate that you listen, when I talk about this sort of thing. But anyway, coexistence is not the only thing, but I think it's one of the very important things. So there's a lot of things that go into this thing called co-visioning. And I think the open space does that. I think the unblocking kind of does that. But in particular, I wanted to make it a formal part of what we do here in barn raising. The second piece is then, when we're talking, especially in terms of values and visions and that sort of thing, we all use different experiences, and that experience informs the terms and words that we use. So a lot of what we need to do if we're having meaningful co-visioning discussions is, how do we make sense together? What words are we using? What objects are we talking about? What interactions are we talking about? What flows are we talking about? What transformations are we talking about? What are the systems and understandings that we're trying to talk about? Because this piece helps us to say we're not just talking motherhood and apple pie. We're actually sharing some of the same implications and connotations. And Dictopedia is a project, of course, that I think, in my mind, fits in here. So I think in order to do co-visioning, we need to learn how to do sense making together. Okay, so that's the second key idea here. Okay. The third idea is if we're actually doing this, we're going to come from a lot of different places. So my thinking here is, how do we best do that? And my going in assumption right now, my working model is really be open to co-creation. And this is where I'm trying to emphasize the importance of disagreeing well or misunderstanding well. Just have a curiosity, have a mindset that here, here to learn. Other people might be here to learn. I can learn from you. We might actually identify something that I never knew before. I could be wrong. Fundamental to this, for me, is the scientific method. And this is a big discussion. I think, science and religion come up almost all the time. I posted something this week that's, drawn a lot of discussion there. So I think there's definitely key nuggets about how you approach a learning mindset, how you be open to co-creation. And to me, the scientific method is at the core of this. But if we're talking about the scientific method, then this notion of truth is also core to this discussion. And this is where last week I talked about how nonsensical it seems to me to talk about my truth, your truth, and to think that there is no absolute truth so we can actually abandon the value of truth. I think that's very misguided. So this learning mindset is very important to me. And in this learning mindset, you have to identify, where are the beliefs? Some people actually hold beliefs to be true, and they hold them to be true beyond themselves, as if they need to be imposed on other people. And this is where religion, I think, causes problems. So the notion of what is belief, what is truth, is entangled here in how we have this learning mindset and how we be open to co-creation. But if we can actually get that far, then I think about how are we here to make agreements? What kinds of alignment can we actually achieve? How do we start? How do we engage one-on-one? How do we disagree / misunderstand well, with a curiosity about reasonable people and why they could think something differently than what I think different than what I think. And then that would be an interesting conversation. And I think those are the conversations that we can have here. And then once we go and do that one-on-one, we can start doing that in small groups, which is what we're doing here right now. And then we think about, how does this scale? We haven't answered that question yet. We don't really know yet. But I think core to this is memory. I think, memory belongs in here somewhere. Okay. And then where do we want to scale? Well, potentially, since we're talking about the planet and making sure that the planet is a thrivable, resilient place, I think the impact is at planetary scale.
Can we comment before you go on to the next level of the onion?
Yeah,
Thanks.
do it.
Let's keep them crisp. Yeah, good comment. I got some, definitely. First of all, whoa, I love this. This is awesome. Really, really great stuff. I thought the beginning was like right on track, and then you have lots of things here, obviously. Then you came to the point about truth and about making sense together. So this is, the learning mindset. I could learn something here, could be wrong. The scientific method: wonder, observe, hypothesize, test, verify, refine, iterate. Truth. So what is truth? I would possibly ask that question, have that question there. What is under truth? What is truth? And this is a big, super interesting question. So I have a very simple definition of it. Objective truth is what actually happens as it actually happens, down to the total detail, with every single atom, every single place, every being, every constellation, every scale, the actual way that it is truth with the capital letter. And then if you take, let's say, subjective truths or experiences truths, then that will be a part of that space of events. So with that point of view, the personal subjective experience is true, always 100% true, but is a part of something larger than it, which goes infinitely beyond it. So that means that the subjective belief systems are true as psychological experiences, yet they do not represent any totality beyond themselves necessarily, but maybe in the sense they reflect on them. But, all the typical criticisms that the subjective point of view is limited, obviously it's true. We all act on limited information. We have our points of view, and we act out our behaviors, and it's, responses to surroundings, many conditions that cause us to react the way we do. But then we have also these general ideas about what's true. So the truth with capital T then seems to be too vast for any human to realistically be able to comprehend it, obviously. So that's sort of like just, it's beyond us, just due to its sheer magnitude. But that doesn't mean that it isn't there. Like, the truth with capital T, it exists. And, that's just a fact. So if you call that God, then God exists, or if you call it universe or the multiverse. But that's sort of the larger truth, which from the personal point of view always seems to be unknown. So what I wanted to go to there is that I followed the conversations between the groups in later years, calling themselves Christians, calling themselves atheists, and others conversations, and I noticed something very interesting. What is the meeting point between the perspectives? And there is one. And it is that both claim that we as humans do not understand all there is to understand. That's what the people representing science are saying. That's what the people representing religions are also saying. In their different ways, they're saying a call to wonder, a call to amazement, a call to humility, just being humble because reality as a whole is too complex for us to fathom it. And then the religious person kind of sees that sort of like an ecstasy, like, whoa, it's like, that's so awesome. And then the scientific mind is more like the intellectual way. But actually, it's kind of the same message if you really get down to it. And I think that's a very interesting convergence in that conversation that has occurred naturally over a longer period of time. And I think I'll leave it at that. But that was a few comments, and I love this whole thing here.
I'd love to
very useful structure.
Man, that would be a key thing. I think you could either diagram or write up, or maybe call in the diagram, because I think there's some interesting nuggets there that I may not have caught as I was trying to take notes as you were speaking. Okay.
Well, yeah, sure. So we're just thinking aloud here, obviously. But now it's all recorded. But I think it's very interesting to look into this, and I've been talking a bit with Joshua about these questions too, and he has a lot of very interesting point of views. So yeah, Alex, you got something?
Yeah. So before I go further, Alex, Colin, I think you guys wanted to comment.
I heard Glenn mention the word convergence, and I think that's a big part of what can occur when agreements are working together. So this convergence and coherence is what's resonating at the moment. There's a change in brain chemistry. When you reach coherence, there's a change in brain chemistry that causes, it affects our state of mind, you know, it affects our being, our happiness, our sadness, and it's to do with the serotonin, you know, the other neurotransmitters. So there's something tied up between how we feel and what we believe. Over.
I'd be curious if you would write that up also, Alex.
Yep, I volunteer to give myself more work.
All right, done.
I'm a masochist.
Colin, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, no, I think this is all pretty good, and it's it puts me in mind of setting up a certain space of this gracious or you know, co-understanding, or the desire to take part in the scientific method, you could say. Like, not everybody wants to play the scientific method game or versions of it, and you know, so in order to set an atmosphere of where people can engage fairly and I don't want to use the word safely, but confidently. So, you know, to set up that you know, some people don't hit it off really well and they don't get much accomplished, and other people seem to be able to co-align align very easily to have that, you know, productivity gain or whatever it is, you know, moving forward. So I see this very much like a setting the stage of how would you say, making sure everybody wants to participate, and at what level do they want to participate, and, you know, I'm trying not to use the word expectations. So to be clear on what it is that you're doing and what level you want to commit. So it comes down to, you know, these micro agreements. That's why it's a big part of it. Once you start to discuss that there's some effort to be put in here, like, you know, Alex just micro agreed to do something, Glenn just micro agreed, but how does it all fit in, and does that change the atmosphere any, which would be, you know, could be see how it mattered, and what does it add to the memory or to the inertia, to the expectations, to the goal, to the plan. You know, so, you know, we're very abstract here because we're working with trying to set the right environment or incubation for this kind of stuff to happen. But I assume that each person has their own projects as well that they're working on. So I see that as sort of like two separate things that are in the room at the same time, what you're contributing to the whole of this process of barn raising, and also what we're doing for ourselves, and what, you know, we call, I guess, in the PK, we're starting to call those pods. So if you get a pod, it's its own little project. So each one of us would have our own pod, say, and then, you know, the GCC is a larger entity, and barn raising is a piece of that. So it's all kind of layered, and to be in the right mindset of what you're working on and how you're contributing. So I guess it's the conscious level of reciprocity that you're at, you know, because if you don't want to give back and be in that listening and you know, back and forth mode of you know, coexisting and collaborating, then, you know, you're kind of not really having a conversation anyway. And I find that very frustrating. And so to avoid not have, like, you might think back to Sunday, the discussion between Doug and you, where, you know, that was semantics, and it's important, but it's a waste if people don't want to play fairly with the semantics game. So what are the rules to play semantics game? Or are we just going to keep going in a circle? Anyway, I'll leave it there. I think it's more of being prepared, ready, knowing what your pod is, and staying focused on that at the same time, trying to give back to the whole in a way that you're not, or in a way that you are listening, I guess. So listening.
So Colin, basically you get frustrated when you feel it's a waste of time, right?
Well, I felt I felt a bit triggered too that, you know, I would like to have a game of discernment between Doug
Yeah.
and Sam and have
Because
them,
I think we should just do that. I mean,
yeah, we
what
should
Sam's been
schedule
saying too.
a semantics
That
game.
no, I mean, we should do it now because
Well,
he's
we can't do it
got the
now, but
recipe.
we
Yeah.
can't do it. We can do it soon, but the thing is,
Now we can do it
a lot of
today.
what I'm saying is if you're in the right context, a lot of this is obvious. Which
This is the
sad.
right context, Colin. We
No,
can
I mean,
do that
like,
today.
well, we can talk about these things, but
We don't have to waste our time today. We can begin co-visioning. We can.
Oh, I misunderstood. I was saying we can't pull Doug and Sam into.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
That's, yeah, you misunderstood me there. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're doing,
that's,
and I think that to your point, the thing is it's quite obvious that if we are in the right atmosphere, mindset, cognitive alignment, then this stuff is kind of obvious.
yeah, I think it's obvious
That's the
that you
sad
got to
part.
do
That's the sad part.
co-visioning
But
because
what's obvious? What's
otherwise
obvious
we're
to
just
you?
going to continue repeating this pattern of talking about the past. You know, we you know, that's the problem. It just keeps repeating itself. But if we start really co-visioning and learning how to make sense together, and we do that in the barn racing, then we can make some progress. And
Well, I think
that's when we
comes down
can.
to format. It comes down to
Yeah.
format, and yeah, I would just finish by saying that.
Then we can do a game of discernment, right?
Yeah, well, you can have all kinds of formats set up to try to get to the heart of a matter of why people disagree poorly, or they can't seem to engage in the scientific method.
Well, I would rather actually engage in the scientific method than talk about all the people who do it wrongly. I would rather personally do it correctly. Why not just do the scientific method the way it's supposed to be done?
I think the thing is Sam was saying is there's some things that tip the apple cart, and emotions do that, and what's obvious
Emotions
to you
can also inspire us.
Yeah, but I say what's obvious and you agree, but what's obvious to you may not be what's obvious to me. So how do we get on the same page as what's obvious and what's not?
Yeah, well then we got to define our terms. And
well, we have to have a scope, and we have to have a bit of a format, and we have to listen, and
yeah, we have to
converge, like, you know, as Alex was saying, not just go wide all the time. But that's just it. If emotions join into it, it's hard.
Can't see the people's hands raised, so I have to interrupt.
Yeah, go for it, Alex.
If a simple agreement is made between two, I can't call them members of the group because it's not a group. But if two participants come to an agreement, we need a better word for that. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe agreement. It was an agreement because it was simple and two people connected and agreed and passed it on to somebody else. That's called co-creation. That's called moving forward. So agreement's too simple a word, I think. In order to create pull, Doug was talking about pull, there's no pull for him to come forward and join and take part. So when we create that pull with a better word than agreement, we could get some traction, possibly. There's another word, traction. Anyway, that's about it.
So anyway, I'm trying to take notes as best I can when I'm hearing things without wanting to respond too quickly. But I think you guys can follow along. Certainly, I hope the video captures some of what I was trying to do as I was listening.
Since I know you're so interested in agreements, Sam, maybe I'd also put it this idea that an agreement is for those who agree with it as long as they agree with it.
Yeah.
That could be a very simple way of looking at it, that an agreement applies for those who actually agree with it. So therefore, it's not a problem if everybody doesn't want to do the same thing because they don't have to.
That's right.
Yeah, not a disagreement.
So
what do you think about that? Yes. So
I was hoping that maybe what I said might have stuck through a little bit more than that. What I'm saying is, that's why I keep harping on this context. When we come here, we should come with a certain amount of personal memory and group memory that we follow up on. That's the getting ready part, and you grow that through experience. So how do you co-align, exist, co-work on that? So each person may or may not, I'm just suggesting, may have the responsibility to bring their pod here and make it well known, and not make it difficult to ask questions about it and to coexist with it. And then it's almost like, sharing of ideas, and people who resonate with your ideas or may have something to contribute can. Somebody may hear what you have to say and give you some really good advice, but not actually be a partner, and it could make a big difference. Or someone may work with you a long time and give you that longevity to stick to it. Like, exercise and training, things like that. It's good to have a partner to keep you getting up in the morning. So the pod, so what is your pod, Glenn? What is your pod, Alex? What is your pod, Sam? What is my pod? And what can we contribute? That's at one level. And then this document that Sam is making is sort of at a higher level, saying, how can we facilitate those things, which is very much what PKE was doing. And depending on the type of group, you have to define what it is your group is getting together to do. Like, this isn't a bowling group. We're not a knitting group. We're not a book reading group. We're a collaboration group. And we're much more than that too. So collaboration's wide open. So if you don't have something to bring to collaborate on, then it's just turning into a support group of talk.
Well,
which is okay.
If we're co-visioning, what if we're a co-visioning group?
Well, I think
now I'm talking about the barn racing, like today. If we say that's why we're here, we're co-visioning.
Yeah, I think that is it. That's it.
We're dream weaving. We're imagineering. We're thinking about possibilities. We're exploring possibilities, and we're doing it actively in such a way that those ideas may develop to a point of sophistication and integration and true understanding that they might, open up.
I think you're talking about an emergence of some sort, maybe?
Yes, emergence of knowledge and understanding, not least, because the problem is that there's, in the communication channels that are commonly used, there are so many misunderstandings, and the quality of communication is often so low, especially in social media, and especially between people who strongly disagree in social media, where they don't see each other, they're speaking completely past one another. So that's a part of the problem. But if we can,
it's voluntary.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's also a pattern where people are arguing about things from the past instead of thinking even now and trying to co-create together. So what if we then, when we're meeting here, what if what we're really doing is that we're co-creating a new kind of vision and a new kind of opportunity space and space of ideas and the new philosophy and frameworks and ways of speaking and ways of listening, where we gradually co-create together a new understanding, which is a new understanding of the world in general today, but also a new understanding of ourselves, and a new understanding, not least, of what is possible to create. So then at some point, when our understanding is good enough, we may then clearly know what we want to co-create, and we may even know exactly how to co-create it. And the reason why it would work would be that it would be so good that everyone would benefit, and then all conflicts of interest would actually be eliminated. But that's further down the line. And Alex, I know you want to say something. I was just thinking about what you said earlier. Yeah, these things take time, and they do. I mean, it's a slow process. It takes time. Yeah.
When you said that as the as the understanding coalesces, we come to more agreements. Well, we need a folder, knowledge repository, where they can be prioritized, maybe a number of folders, because once the agreements, the best ones, are prioritized, they're easier for others to come and locate and focus on. If they're not prioritized, people could be starting at the wrong end of the list, you know what I mean? And wasting valuable time.
Yeah, but at the same time, they also have to be improved continuously, right? That's also a part of what we're doing. We're sort of developing the ideas continuously. So at any moment, we could write a list, obviously. But I think the most interesting list would be the really great ones. You know, what are the top 10?
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, now I really like what you're saying, and your feedback to what I was saying was good. I wasn't finished with what I was saying, and that's part of knowing when somebody has actually unpacked their idea, what they're ready to say, and how they're going to present it. To know that, you know, good speakers will say, "I'm going to tell you 3 things." They'll tell you the 3 things, then they'll tell you, "I just told you 3 things," and then, you know, they're done in some form, or you know, I say great speakers, very clear speakers. You can't be any clearer than that. So if I said, "I want you to look at this map," Sam says, "I want to go over this particular document," he's bringing something. So he has something concrete. I have something concrete as well in my mind that's burning, that I want to be able to have understood and be able to understand other people. So it's kind of meta too. It's, you know, it's in this category of conversation. So how do we know it's obvious? Now, these things you're saying about these very utopian type of language that you use, kind of.
No, I'm talking about co-creation that's happening between us.
Well, I can't. I don't want to interrupt you when you're saying it, because you're in a flow and it sounds wonderful. But I'm just saying that I'm looking for a balance in between. It takes a long time. It's going to come together. We should be looking for the very best of options. I think being understood is huge, and the best of options is how do we give people options to be understood better. So if they don't know what they're bringing and they're just waiting for something to emerge, that is another state of being, which is fine, but it's very confusing and frustrating for people who are trying to move a particular thing forward. And I find that a conflict that arises in this group between people who are very concrete and people who are very abstract. And how do we help put guardrails on those things and the personalities involved so that the understanding can continue? And I'm saying, why don't we just do a short circuit and tell me what it is you want to be understood? Like, bring it. Like, be ready and bring it. Don't make, and if you don't know what it is, say, I really don't know what it is I'm bringing, but I'm on a quest to find it, and this is what it kind of looks like. So define what you don't understand to your best of your abilities. To say that with the right amount of collaboration, it will just happen, just bothers me somehow. That it just seems like a circular conversation, although it's worth being here supporting each other. I guess what I'm trying to say, when you think you're actually making progress when you're not, I think is dangerous. So how do we measure that, and how do I know that when I hear the next thing, it adds to what you said before and not the same thing you were saying 6 months ago? Because really, it's the philosophy of it all is very, very important. But if it's going to take a long, long time, it doesn't move very fast. So we should know that and use that to its strength, as opposed to things that do move fast.
So what if we decide to move it fast?
Well, not everything can move fast. Everything moves at the speed it moves at the understanding you give it. So the more you understand, the faster it can move, in my opinion.
Of course.
And yes, and the agile method is one that I like to use, and I think of, and I think it comes naturally.
But what was it that you wanted to share, Colin? Because if you have something burning, then you can share that, and then that will be helpful for all of us.
Well, the fact you asked that question means I'm doing a really bad job at it, or I'm in the wrong forum, or people aren't listening, or something's going wrong, right? Because it's not like I haven't said before what it is that I'm doing.
You have said a lot, because you've also said, for example, that you want to map the field of people and have profiling, and that's an example of something that can
Well, let's not.
part of the,
We can talk about that after. I don't want to.
well, that's a
pull
part
off
of the
at Sam's
knowledge repository that
It
Sam's
definitely is.
talking about. So
Well, I had a
that's the
one-on-one
point.
with Sam. I had a one-on-one with Sam, and I think he got some downloads from that, and he knows that it is.
That is super interesting, actually, because that's one of the emergent ideas in the field. Is maybe the one clearest big emergent idea is this knowledge repository of the people and profiling of people.
Well,
Look at anyone.
Google's
Everyone's
already got
interested in this.
the biggest profile of people. If you want it, we just have to pay for it. You know.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the best profile.
No, the
because-
biggest.
Well, I mean,
Did you?
YouTube, they can see a lot of what I'm putting in, but it's a lot that they don't see. So
I guess the question is, what are we co-creating, and what is your vision, and how do we have?
I think we're
How do we in
co-creating that.
how do we in 7 sentences get to the heart of the matter without
Here, we're co-creating that database, that knowledge database of the people. That's a part of what we're co-creating, clearly.
We're thinking along the terms of memory and group shared memory, but we've got to keep in mind the fact that the AI has access to everything, all the data. The AI doesn't have to worry about memory.
That's true, Alex. Yet the AI is no independent agent. The
That's the
AI
Yeah,
is
so that's
just
the
a
point.
tool
A
that at the
failing-
moment is completely controlled by humans.
Well, what I'm getting at is that it's a failing of us as participants in the group to focus on memory issues, because the AI doesn't have that problem.
Yeah,
I don't see the relation there really between AI. AI is a tool. It's like a hammer doesn't have a memory issue. You know, hammer can build buildings. Like the carpenter has to remember how to build the buildings. AI is a tool.
We
Yeah,
have to
it's a
remember
tool.
to go and look in the knowledge repository.
AI can facilitate us. See, the thing is, it's people who have the money to afford the tools, and it's people who own the tools. And it's the, you know, if you get a mentor that has a grasp of artificial intelligence and you ask him the right questions, he'll help you use that tool to get the answers you need. But AI is basically smart databases that can assimilate information and look for commonalities through statistical methods. It's a training, learning. There's a few different formats, but they're tools and they're very powerful. What's more, I was speaking about wasn't the AI that way. It was the collection of data that
the thing that's
what
evolving,
Glenn was saying about profiles.
doesn't need a memory because it's evolving and it's rapidly evolving.
Yeah, evolving. So can
I would say
that,
I wouldn't say a memory. I would say new information and making possible. You know, it's like a microscope. Before we had a microscope, we couldn't look at that level of detail. Now,
so Colin,
now we
can
have
we
a microscope.
Yeah, it can't
so
see
Colin, can we
everything.
say
It
No,
can't
you
see
can't.
everything. Yeah. That's a problem. It can only see a limited amount. The
Yeah.
point is it can remember everything it sees.
There is
Well,
definitely something to be said for the
it can't
database.
really
Yes.
remember because it doesn't exist as such. But
Can I interrupt?
can we say that?
Yes, please,
yeah, but
please.
just before you
I
go
can't
in,
get the point out.
can we say that the AI depends on us?
I'm finding that our communications today are frequently interrupted.
Yes,
For some
please.
reason. And I think there's something going on today that I don't quite yet grasp. Maybe there's an energy, maybe there's an excitement, maybe there's an alignment, but for some reason we seem to be interrupting each other more today than other days.
No, we're in a flow, Sam. We're exploring this question.
I'm challenging. I'm asking some challenging things.
We're in a flow. So the question is, who controls the AI? Can we say that these tools depend on us? So if we are smart, the AI becomes smart. Is that true, Sam? Please, I would love to hear what you think about that.
Well, I can address that point, but to me, that's kind of on the periphery of some of the things that have been addressed, and I'm not even done going through my shared remarks yet. I
Right.
think all of
It's
them.
not in the periphery, it's in the central, because we're talking about human machine interactions, and we're now talking through machines. So this is very coherent with the theme of co-visioning, because we have to have a vision for how we can communicate and use the machines in a new way. So then we're into AI, but what does AI mean? And it's the relation between the humans and the machines, so it depends on us, and we can all be responsible for us. So then we're back to how can we be different? And that's why I'm asking, how can we be different with the machines? That's what all of this comes down to.
I don't see all of anything coming down to anything. I think that the conversation's been derailed by free thought association, and I would like to get back
What's derailed about it? We're talking
it's very
about.
well. You're going from one point, freely associating to the next thing. Now we're on an artificial intelligence conversation that has.
No, we're not in that. We're
Well,
back here
we're talking about.
now.
I would just like to say that if we're going to co-vision, what is it that's your vision? Can you say it in 7 sentences without
Yes,
talking about
I can
somebody
say it in
else's
7
thing?
sentences.
And
For
can we
us
do that later? Can we do that later?
together,
And go
not
ahead.
later, here and now, to find
It
together.
won't be 7 sentences. I bet you $10.
Hey,
it won't be 7 sentences.
Glenn. For some reason, I'm feeling that your participation today is markedly different than past sessions, and I'm really curious how you're showing up today.
Well, I know I'm on a roll, and it's just that I see this. All this comes down to the same question. We've come down to it hundreds of times before, and it's how can we be? How do we want to be? And we don't have to be derailed. I want to go into that question. And that question has to do with how can humans and other humans and machines and everything coexist together in a very beautiful way. And we don't have to worry about all the crap that's happened before. We can create a new way of being. That's why I'm going on.
Can I propose something? I think you have an expression of what it is we're doing here. I suggest that we set aside some time for you to do that, either in a separate session or in the second half of this session or whatever. But I think you feel like you have an expression to be understood. I likewise heard Colin with the same request, that he wants to be understood.
Okay, I'm open for everything, Sam. I'm just asking you the question. What do you guys want to create?
I would like to create a conversation with Doug and Sam to find greater understanding, an actual tool example of a conversation, and then break that apart and see why it worked, why it didn't work. Almost like an experiment, sociology plus computer science plus database plus intention plus all those things that you just said, Glenn, but actually do something, because anything I try to do just becomes a project of one, and I don't really have a how do you say full-time investment in this.
What do you want to do, Colin? What do you want to do?
Well, we can talk about that after Sam. I already said I'd talk about that later, and I suggest, we put our cards on the table, but let's do it later if you're not ready, because I don't think this is the time to dump it out.
This is the time.
All of my pet peeves are coming back in this talk.
Glenn?
Question.
My request, Glenn, is that my humble request is to give me an opportunity to go through the rest of these notes here, because I felt that I was on a roll and then you got on a roll, and I like
your floor, Sam. Come on, bring it on. I love it. I love you.
How can we have a button for that in the future?
There's a suggestion.
I want a one button for that maneuver, Sam, in the future.
Yeah.
Sam needs a suggestion for the primary directive, and if we've all got a primary directive, we need to have it written down, right, on a piece of paper. we can share that primary directive with each other because that's part of the impact. And if we want to have a community of impact, this is the way to go about it. Prioritizing that list is essential. Oh,
Right, and I hear in your language about the upper level pod of the whole group, which is great, but I'd also like to see you do that for your pod, and I just asked Glenn to do it with his 7 sentences, and Sam's got his 10 sentences ready to go. So without further ado, go ahead, Sam, please.
Okay, so the meta comment here is, I would like to finish this expression of some of the prepared notes that I came with. I would like then to schedule some time where Glenn could go through his expression, and then secondly also to schedule some time for Colin, you to go through your expression. And if we can't do it all today, for us to use some shared memory like Trello or like Braid, or, or like Facebook, whatever you want to use, so that we can actually track those proposals and those actions so that we don't forget them. Because otherwise, Glenn's going to feel ignored. You're going to feel ignored, Colin. Maybe I feel ignored because, I was on a roll here and I like the energy. I like what it stimulated, but it also didn't let me finish, some of these feelings, these thoughts here. And so I just wanted to at least observe that our participation today seems to be a little bit different than in past sessions. Over.
But it was really interesting, Sam. That's why I got so engaged, because of what you showed.
I mean, I like the
energy. You should go through the whole thing because I think this is great. But then we sort of have some bouncing around, during that.
Well, keep in mind that these are thoughts. None of these thoughts are at all new to any of you guys. I brought them up from time to time. I'm just trying to organize it in a flow where it kind of makes sense, okay, in some way. It's a tour through some of these thoughts, okay?
I noticed that when Sam's typing and concentrating on the keyboard, that gives Glenn and Colin the opportunity to go for it. So that's where the interactions have been happening. And I was having trouble getting noticed because I was trying to get in too, but I was raising my hand and nobody was seeing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that then Sam came back and said, hang on, I've been typing now. How about shutting up everyone so I can get my bit in?
We got plenty of time.
All right, so let's take a collective breath here, okay? And are we okay with me at least continuing through the rest of these thoughts here before we open it up to those other items that I mentioned? Going once, going twice. Okay, I'm going to take that as assent, okay? So if I may re-engage, I think where I was if we're open to co-creation, and I've elaborated a lot of these items based on what you guys were saying, by the way. So we went through the learning mindset, the scientific method, truth, beliefs, convergence, which is really the co-creation part. And then the question is, how do we communicate that? That's the group memory, knowledge repository sort of issues, okay? And then I'm really interested in what agreements do. Now, to me, agreements, as you guys have heard from me before, are empowering. They're enabling. They're not restrictions. They're not handcuffs. They're not punitive, but they are empowering, okay? So I'm trying to look at that notion of agreements. So how do we model that? How do we engage it? How do we form these agreements? Which comes to how do we disagree well? How do we get through misunderstandings, which was addressed earlier? And what we're doing here in GCC, I think one of the main things is how do we model disagreeing well? How do we model misunderstanding well? With a curiosity, with a generosity, with the open space to let other expression come in, okay? If we don't do that, I think conflict arises and misunderstandings and misexpectations and disappointments and, people leaving and people pouting and, people blaming, all this sort of thing. So I think there's a real opportunity here for us to really try and do good disagreement. Now, disagreement, by the way, is a triggering word, especially I believe for Doug. It was addressed last week. To me, disagreement is what happens around the world. So why avoid that word? We can use other words. Yes, we can. But why avoid that word simply because it's a word a lot of people understand, by the way. The whole world understands, yes, there is disagreement.
I think that's a
And how do
great
we
topic.
skip? How do we engage? How do we engage in small groups? Sorry, what was that?
I think that's a great topic. In fact, I think that's a key to understanding is knowing how to disagree.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of my key insights from these years of conversations is seeing disagreement, but seeing it be uncomfortable for certain, and that discomfort driving people away.
You
And I
hit
think
the nail
that,
on the head. It's emotion. It
yes.
is because when the data disagrees, we know what to do, right?
So what do you
And
mean by disagreement, Sam? How would you define it?
Um, okay, so let me take a small aside on that. Okay, let's say, for example, that I think the scientific method is a good way to approach the world. Let's say someone else believes that science is, full of shit, and it's coming up with all this, bogus science, and it's funded by the smoking and cigarette industry, so they don't believe in science. So somebody says science is bogus, and I'm saying science is actually a good way to approach the world. I think that happens many, many, many times. It even happened in a Facebook discussion this week. So where I would like to go with that is, so what do you think science is? And I would like the other person to ask, what do I, Sam, think science is? Because there's a fundamental disconnect there. Some people believe that science is embodied in the institutions that claim to practice it. To me, that's not science at all. To me, science is the actual method of dealing with the world, of observing, of hypothesizing, of verifications, of experimentation, of reformulating knowledge, of reformulating hypotheses, of really trying to verify, with really trying to make yourself wrong to try and see if those hypotheses stand up. To me, that's science. Science is not embodied by any particular set of institutions. And on the other hand, if we go and take a look at religion, in possibly my mind as well, is embodied in most of the institutions that claim to practice it. Okay? So there's a disconnect in my mind about why is religion so identified with its institutions, but why do I hold the
I
scientific
don't know. Yes.
separate from scientific institutions? That's a good conversation right there as well. So anyway, I'm trying to say that to disagree well, to really dig into misunderstanding requires a care, a generosity, a curiosity, and some patience, and some ability to move through notions that one may not hold yet as true, but to
Man.
hold them in some way to say, test it. Let me test this notion rather than just say, oh, that's bullshit. Okay. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's a partial answer to your question, Glenn. Okay. But is that sufficient so that we can move on?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. You mentioned scientific institutions but also spirit. That science isn't in the institutions. At the same time, there's obviously universities and all of this stuff and money involved as well. So some would say that what passes for science isn't really real science, but the true science is the scientific method, as you say, or just, real honesty and looking at facts and observations. But at the same time, something similar might be the case for religion as well, that you have a lot of these institutions, but which they kind of isn't the real thing, because the real thing is this inner search, and sometimes meetings where people um, perform certain rituals and meditation and prayer, which of course would be a very different thing. I mean, that's obviously a whole big discussion, but when you talk about disagreements, I mean, this is very interesting because I sometimes wonder, is it that we don't accept that the other person has a different experience, or is it that we want different things in a situation? I mean, I don't know if that's an interesting distinction.
I think those are
There's
all
a,
components of disagreement.
there's
And
a,
that's
there's a
why I think,
distinction.
learning to find out where that disagreement is rooted. If people
Yeah,
care about other people, you would actually take the time and that generosity to really understand. If you don't care, then one goes into labeling, which is a form of violence. He's bullshit, or he's an idiot, or this person's non-scientific, or whatever that labeling turns, because that closes down that curiosity, that closes down that investigative inquiring approach. And so then, there's a lost opportunity there. You can't co-create anymore once you've actually labeled.
Exactly. You gotta have that openness. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, there's a number of scientists that are very well respected, who have a great appreciation for nature, the beauty in nature, and some of them are very deeply spiritual. The scientific has a clash with religion, but spirituality is a different section, on a different plane, I think.
Right.
Spirituality is more of higher thought patterns. And when we meditate, the inner journey and the discovery of the adventure playground in our imaginations, in the mind.
Well, that's a big conversation right there also.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah, the world of the mind.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
So this notion of good disagreement to me is one of the core things we could be addressing within GCC. But let me just put that aside for now and then say, okay, so agreements enable and empower us to actually act together. Without agreements, we're basically, uncoordinated Brownian motion objects. And if things align, that's more opportunistic rather than designed. So I'm trying to figure out how can we actually intentionally make agreements so that we actually magnify our effects, our impact. Now, to me, that addresses then, how do you come yourself? How do you prepare yourself to come to this kind of behavior? And to me, there's a lot of internal work. There's internal preparation around emotions, around communications, around a lot of other habits. We could go on and on about this, but without that personal preparation, none of this is really possible. Because if someone's very quick to blame, very quick to assume, very quick to judge, very quick to conflict, then a lot of this is not possible. So it is only possible if there's an explicit consideration of how we bring ourselves to this forum, to these conversations, to this community, and to these possible collaborations. But then if you are wanting to do that, and if you really are trying to do that with others, then I think there's a community here. A community of people who want to do good, who want to be explicit about what they do, want to be transparent about what they do, want to be accountable to themselves and to their peers, who want to learn quickly, want to co-create quickly. That to me is the community of impact. And if we can have such a community, then members of that community can figure out where those collaboration opportunities exist. Find alignment, find where we can help each other, find where we can magnify each other's impact and progress, so that that resonance, that coherence represents something greater than the sum of the units, the parts. That optimizes impact. That is my claim, unproven today, but that is my claim. So this is what I think I am here in GCC to do some co-visioning, to make sense with others, to co-create with others, to make agreements with others, to make a community with others, and try and find collaboration opportunities with others.
Yeah, that's really good, Sam. And I think I'm here to try to help build a context around that.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening. I'm going to allow us to look at each other's faces again now. But thanks for letting me go through that. Okay. And I will, of course, share the link to that. And feel free to comment. Okay.
I noticed that people are all at their own stage of development. So when you come into a group and you're learning how to interact, that stage of development where you happen to be in your life is a big part of it. And if you can somehow meld that, you mesh that with the others, you begin to make more progress. But some people are far advanced and some people are lagging behind in their development and understanding of where the AI is headed. I call it the augmented intelligence, because I mean real AI is a long way off yet. Over.
Yeah, if I can I think so. And if I can sum up what I hear, it is this community of impact, people who want to do good, who have maybe a bigger point of view in mind, and find out what we want to agree on and what behaviors we want to agree on, and figure out what do we want, what are our values, what are our beliefs, what is our situation, to have a space where we can really also listen to one another and be willing to be interested, have an open mind, at least a relatively open mind, even though we still got our things, but we try, and we give it time. And if we then remain agile, we can then learn and re-evaluate those agreements continuously, which is what Sam's mentioned many times, that the agreements are written in electrons. So we're always free to change them as we learn more. And through this ongoing process, which is an ongoing conversation, we then grow our repository of group memory, which can come into several databases, and where this group memory is a memory of a body of ideas that have also developed through our conversations, and hopefully a body of clear understanding of what our real purposes are and what we would most want to personally do, each of us, and what we perhaps also need. And if that knowledge can then come into the system in a good way, then at some point we could have a database where we could easily match people with other people that are interested in doing the same things and working on similar projects, and where there's complementary skills. And then if those people who then know that they want the same things and they already have fairly aligned situation, they can then go into more detailed collaborations where they can really hold each other accountable and have regular meetings and follows up, and really try to be one's best and be very disciplined and dedicated. So that's when you're at the end of your list of the projects part. And then you also got this great big idea of a global sim, which I think is even a little further down the line. And as I see it, if we have the database of good profiles of people with what they most want, which is something that isn't in the profiles today. Like Google knows a lot about you, but Google doesn't know what you most of all want because you've never spoken about that. And we hardly even speak about that. But if that knowledge could come in, then that could also be a database which can be purpose driven. And that again leads back to an idea I remember Sam presented 2 years ago, which was a confederation of purpose. So it's the purposes of all the people in the room, and then all of those purposes, once they have been refined and clearly understood and formulated well and put into the system, then all of those purposes together form in themselves a larger purpose. So that the larger purpose then comes out of the totality of all the purposes of the people in the room, and thus is entirely organic. and that the larger purpose can then be like a sort of star that we move towards, which is, perhaps that great unity where all the purposes are perfectly aligned. And then that's the huge possibilities later down the line. So yeah, I think all of this ties in with what we've spoken about. I think it ties in with what you went through in the deep dive, since you had a fairly long deep dive, and I was, I think, present for most of them. I got an understanding of these ideas, and they fit together. It's a coherent vision, and it's a very beautiful model, and it fits together with other beautiful models of a similar kind that exists. Many people are also joining these conversations. Yeah, so that's kind of how I see that.
Thanks for that personal recap, Glenn. So I appreciate you hearing. I appreciate you listening.
And I also think it fits really well with everything Colin brings with his mapping, and everything Alex brings with these local hubs and the AI that we have to co-develop, and the web pages. So there is definitely something about how all these ideas come together. I think because you've developed these ideas also over time, haven't you, Sam? I mean, it's like you spend a lot of time on this.
There's a lot we can learn from science, but it's only one part of the equation when you've got philosophy and religion and other areas of study. But I read a comment in a music book. It said that science, with all its wonderful technology and everything, really can't teach us a lot beyond how things are related and respond with each other. And the art of measuring and labeling things, the scientific method, the problem occurs when you go outside of that simple explanation and you bring in philosophy and politics and religion, and that screws things up. But simplicity is important in science. The fact that the scientific method changes every time somebody your error and you move forward. It's a progressive thing. It needs to be tempered with philosophy and on the other areas, the other arts and humanities. Then we see a bigger picture, I think. Over.
I'm still waiting for the tool that brings this conversation together.
Right.
Philosophy.
What you just said, Alex, because to me, when you say science changes all the time, I don't see that. I don't see that. I think the activities of science, the conclusions of science evolve. Yes, they do. But to me, I don't think that's talking about the scientific method or the approach, which I think doesn't have to change with every new observation. In fact, that's the value of it, is that it applies over a whole universe of observations. And then the second part of your comment about adding the arts or humanities or philosophy or religion, to me, none of those are outside the realm of scientific inquiry. Not at all. I think they're perfect realms for scientific inquiry. It's just that they've been, in a sense, dominated by their own adherents, their own power structures, their own gods, and so they've been relatively impenetrable to scientific inquiry. But I think they're perfectly fine domains for scientific inquiry, in my opinion. Over.
I'd like to add to that, that oversimplification and free association, lack of leadership can really frustrate me in this area where we're getting together. If I'm just looking to have a conversation at the coffee shop, that's all great. And some of that is this. But and you speak about the more human side of things, the non-scientific side, you could say. Those things are all very valuable. I wrap it up a lot in art, and it's personal, and it's a luxury to have that and appreciate that at whatever level somebody can. But at the same time, I think that guides you with what your culture is and what you think is better. So I'm looking for ways to find things that are good. I don't want to find things that are not good, if I can help it, and deal with the things that I find that are not good. And understanding the difference, I think, is huge. And the way we do that was originally through philosophy and religion, but eventually the experiments got more tight, and the bars of error got smaller, and we got more precise. Do we have it right down to complete knowledge and zero error? No. Are some things unknowable? I don't know. But to say that with a swath that, you know, we can't trust this and we can't, it's, things are very complicated and layered. So I'm looking for a way that one can have that conversation. It's a luxurious conversation for people to get together and want to agree. Disagreeing is a luxury. And I think that comes in layers as well. If you have a bully that you're contending with, it doesn't matter what you say. You're not going to be on a conversational plane. You're going to be on an aggressive plane. And even when he's saying, even when the bully's saying yes, you know, he's saying no. So it's like, it's about truth and understanding. So if you don't have that to give, you know, that's the thing we bring. We don't have to keep repeating that over and over again. Whether you find that you're good out of religion or philosophy or helping other people or just, you know, feeling like you're being responsible, like those things are all taken for granted. But yes, they're not science. They're what drives the human race. But how can I tell Sam or any one of you that I'm certain of something and I know it? Like, I'm very shy to say that I know something for certain. In fact, I know things that other people have figured out, and I have to kind of, you know, take it for granted that, you know, things are made out of atoms, right? I've never seen an atom. I've heard that IBM can line them up, which is very amazing. And with artificial intelligence, that's just data organized in a way that people can associate it and correlate it. Now, people have that impedance mismatch or personalities or that thing that makes them different and hard to get on the same page. Whether you even want to talk to somebody, whether you're even interested in what they're talking about, we take that risk coming to this group that there's going to be anything and everything in this room. So how do we go to the next level? It makes me nervous when I hear like we all do this and we all do that. It's like Sam's making a list to elicit higher understanding and move forward. So I would like, in my contribution, to have a way to set these contexts straight so that when you fall outside the lines, you understand why. And if it's important, we can have that conversation another time, because it's another set of responsibility, time, and importance. So there's many, many little conversational experiments. How do we capture them and have them properly and deal with the disagreements in ways that aren't negative, but just realignment of understanding? And then you get to the point where there are some conversations and some topics that are going to trigger people and you can't really have them. So it's good to know that ahead of time too, and not be naive to think that two completely different religions are going to get together and each one of the fundamentalists are going to save the other person. That's just not going to happen in any time short fashion. And, you know, and people thinking they're entitled to land because of religion. And there's just so many layers to the understanding of agreements that people already have taught themselves in their own heads, you know, and we're relearning these things, like the difference between race. We're becoming a much more multicultural world, and you know, people who aren't down with that have got to learn to get down with that and not just fear the other. At the same time, there are some traditions out there that are very scary. So how do you tell the difference between two people that look the same but they're completely different? Right? You can't know. So how do we get that understanding and navigate our way through this complex situation of this global game we're playing? And then at the other level, I would just like to do my little part and have people help me, you know, do this little experiments of conversation. So, you know, it's my responsibility to figure out what that looks like and how to present that. And that's what I was talking to Sam about. So, you know, I see one example. I did a one-on-one with Glenn. That was very valuable. I tried to map some stuff out. I tried to do it with Stacy Dress. It didn't work so well. And then she's just very busy. And then Sam, I would like to do one with him and Doug. So, try to map out where I'm kind of a moderator. So these are, but how do these, and just stick to the one little topic of this disagreement they have over the word disagreement. And, how can we get 4 nodes past that in 30 minutes and have everybody at least agree to have a friendlier conversation next time, or know where the disagreement point is? Like, that's the experiment. So each experiment's different. It's not so much maps to know where we're going. It's maps to map out the unknown, where we can follow again and have that memory of where we've been, because it's all over the place. So when we keep repeating ourselves, we're not being serious about getting farther up the road, or somebody's misunderstood what it is you've brought. So that's our responsibility, to make sure that we're not repeating ourselves in a way that's not productive. Say, excuse me, I've just said that before. Didn't you respect what I've said? Well, I don't understand what you mean. Well, let me say it again one more time. And maybe if we put it on a map and said, this is Glenn's garden, and everybody can come have a look at it, then, that's that profile thing. But that's not, Google already knows what you're about, and they're going to try to sell you stuff. They don't really care what you have to say. The incentives for AI is right now, I think, in a large part about making money, and marketing. Also, the government has AI to find out who's the terrorist. And there's just so much data, Glenn. I don't even understand it all. The level of how big, like, what's the top 10 biggest knowledge repositories on people? Like you're saying, the top 10, those are great things to follow up on. How to find mentors that can help you sift through that information. Because what is the understanding we're after? I don't think the understanding we're after is to understand that we want understanding, but that's the conversation I hear. So how do we move that farther, like a circular conversation? I'd like to move it farther up the road. Alex has got a great idea with bringing together an idea with multiple people. Two people tell two people, tell two people. Glenn's got an idea about the best options. I'd like to have a tool where people can have a conversation, understand where they stand, and move that conversation forward, and have options presented to them if they don't know where to go next. So I might present something to you, or Glenn, saying, could you please write out what the next thing is you want to do? So that would be like that would be the next card you draw in the game. So whatever the game or the experiment you're playing, like, how do you show you're moving forward? How do you feed back and align with people? That's what I'm looking for. Instead of having the conversation, we need to have conversation. I see Sam doing that, but I really, and I see other people having contributions, but I don't see that memory moving forward. And I see we get side-trailed with the context of philosophy and these different things when we're trying to do an experiment, or when we're trying to do philosophy, somebody wants to bring in an experiment. So how do we keep those camps separate? Philosophy is what science was built out of. But once science takes over from philosophy, it's like kind of in science's ballpark then, because they kind of got the handle on it, and philosophy has to look farther out. So there's a big argument between philosophy and science, whether philosophy is actually useful anymore.
Well, don't you think philosophy is kind of right at the core now, because it deals with the basic questions, and the situation has changed so drastically?
I think philosophies are sort of the same idea as, your culture. What do you believe in? What do you think is good? Like, to me, philosophy is about understanding how things come about. And science gets really serious about that once they get an idea. Oh, atoms, let me go study that. Philosophy isn't going to talk about the shape of atoms, right? Philosophy is going to say, gee, I wonder if there's something smaller that things are made out of.
So who is evaluating the situation at the moment from first principles? That sounds like philosophy.
We should be able to state what our philosophical things are. For example, mine's humanism. Somebody else might say it's, Southern Baptist ministry, and somebody else, like, it says a lot about somebody when they say what their worldview is. So I think that's important to understand where people are coming from. Like, I know Dave has got some things going on. How you doing, Dave? I've been.
Good to see you, Dave.
I'd like to turn the floor over to Sam or Dave, and just say that, we have to be very careful about context, how we map it out. And it's not about making the map. It's about being willing to play the game of the experiment, to have, and if you make a map out of it, all the better. To be willing to have that conversation, I think, is, 99% of it.
So weeks ago, maybe months ago, those of us here in GCC did make an agreement that GCC could have a little bit more focus to our conversations than the other more free-ranging conversations. So at times, I've exercised my memory of that agreement. Okay, it's not a formal thing. I'm not trying to be punitive to anybody who doesn't want to do that, but at least we're trying to do this. And so in that light, I'm trying to say, okay, maybe one focus right now, earlier today, sorry you missed it, Dave, was kind of a run through of my kind of a flow for what I'm doing in the GCC. Now, I would invite that we have a similar focus. If we schedule a time for Glenn to do the same, and then for Colin to do the same, and then Alex, if you'd like to do it again, or Dave, if you'd like to do it. So I would like to propose that we kind of use this idea of focus to guide our conversations in such a way that we feel like we're making progress, or we feel like we're not being quite so distracted in real time. And that all of us help with our common understanding of focus to guide these conversations when we see that perhaps it's getting a little bit derailed. Some of that is easier when we interrupt less. And some interruptions, as some people feel, and I think I'm naming you, Glenn, are resonant with what's being expressed, and that's why you really want to add energy to what's being expressed. I get that that's how you want to participate, okay? So we have to find a kind of balance where we can actually let the focus still guide the conversation and yet not dispel the energy that you're bringing to the alignment and to the agreement. So I'm basically proposing that, Glenn, you set up, whether it's between now and the rest of the hour, or whether you want a separate time because you want more time, let's set up one of these sessions where you can actually go through your expression of what GCC is and what you're doing in GCC and how it all hangs together. Kind of like what I tried to do today. Colin, I invite you to do the same. In fact, this invitation is an open invitation. It doesn't have to be on Saturdays. It can be at any time that you schedule, and we can actually put it on the calendar and make it happen. So
I could do a little thing next Saturday, possibly. I mean, I don't have to have the whole session, but I could definitely, put something forward that could be interesting.
okay, Glenn, I am putting in my own notes for next Saturday that you will have a segment of it to go through your expression of what you're doing in GCC. Okay? Great. I think that's progress.
And
Colin, would you like to do the same?
I would like to make a proposal that is aligned with this idea.
Okay.
I've changed it into a two-parter. The first part, I think, would do well if we had maybe a 5-question survey. Each person in the group has to answer it. So they don't have to give a presentation, but they at least have to state their orientation with what's going on. So, that would be, what is it? What is it to you? Why are you here? Kind of just, in a few sentences. What would you like? What's your main, focus on as a project to collaborate with people? What would you like to collaborate on? I think that's very important. And then that would be like that would be a seed for whatever grows out of that, so that we know where that's, instead of just bringing your harvest. I'd like to see what you're planning on planting as well. So if we all, and that survey was done at the PK, and it was a very useful thing. It was kind of like a mandatory thing, a quick little thing to do, that I think brought people together quite well, understanding what intentions were. And I think it takes a long time to feel people out in an open, free thought association type of format.
So Colin, if you've got those 5 questions, how do you feel about A, doing it in real time at a session like this, or B, setting it up as a poll in Facebook so that people can actually, write down their responses and then come here and possibly discuss them.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see a format where there's like what you're doing, having a little more focus. You come with an agenda, and then we can parking lot ideas for the future, sort of punt the ball ahead, and that's kind of what we're doing. And I'm just saying, we could back up 2 steps too and say, let's have a little survey of what people, there could also be the part of that is what is GCC has been established as a memory. Like we could reduce the size of the map, and we could do a lot to orient better the focus so that people can find where they fit better. Because again, it seems like we're always at the outer level in the meet and greet room. And Sam's proposing, well, beyond meeting and greeting, why don't we do something, and it can be any day you want, not just a meet and greet Saturday. So I can see that. So have a little survey. You want to know if I have those 5 questions. I think it was more like 20 questions. It was quite an in-depth one, but I'm sure we could come up with 5 good questions, basic questions. The group may already have it. The Facebook page may already have 3 questions. That may be
we could create a whole map for one session, I think. We went through and...
Yeah, well, the thing is to stay focused on what we want to do. Like another good thing would be, after that has been put out, like we could put each other on the hot seat and say, what do you know of other people's survey here? Have do you know what Alex is looking for and asking for? Do you know what Dave's asking for? Do you know what Glenn's asking for? And it can be that people aren't asking for anything. And I've already started down this road. And Anna, for example, didn't want anything. She was looking for connection. And when I kept pressing her for the focus of what her purpose, what she would propose, she didn't have any kind of a proposal. She wanted to just have that connection and grow that human element thing that science can't touch. So that's a very important thing to know that. So you're not trying to get her to go into a science experiment, unless it sounds like something that everybody would want to take part in. She's probably, what are your aptitudes? What do you want to do? That's what we're trying to figure out. And if your aptitude is holding like the deep dive long lectures and the long walks in the park, it's more of an somebody who's a content, somebody who's building content. You might want to have a website. You might want people to help you publish stuff, maybe, maybe books and things. Maybe you want to meet with certain people to ask those key questions that would move ahead what it is you might be able to focus on if you just knew more about what it is. I find it very difficult, Glenn, because you're so high up in the context that I find it difficult to figure out what it is exactly where we could work together other than making content. So, and we've tried a little bit of that. So yeah, I'd like to see that very much, Sam, move these conversations forward through focus and intention. So really, I can take part in something like that, but I'm just looking to have the context more clear so that we have a focus on one day and we talk about that thing and we move it forward. And I have a vision of it as a map of nodes. And if you can move that map 2 or 3 nodes further, then you've got somewheres. And so the node for you and Doug would be, what is it, the problem of these terms, these semantics? And you'd each get to go off, what do you mean by disagreement? What do you mean by disagreement? And then have the bot ready to give the next branch saying, okay, so, of these 4 concerns, which one is it? And so the, bots can be extremely complicated. So, we build this flow chart of coexistence, I guess, of how you can change language and bring together if there's a common intention. If there's not a common intention, then you're going to have a disagreement. And again, I think it's been mentioned that people who follow dogmas can be quite controversial, can be quite disagreeable when it comes to new ideas. They're not open-minded. They're very closed-minded. So closed-minded people are difficult to work with. It's just the way it is. So how do we find those things out and avoid those conversations? If Doug is going to be a closed-minded person about what it means to be negative and have disagreements, I just can't see that. So I see a very fruitful conversation between Sam and Doug. I see that as maybe a very interesting thing we could all kind of participate on and try to help Doug and Sam co-align with, you know, maybe some of the static in the room, because it might be actually holding up the rest of the group. Who knows? So, you know.
I love that idea. What do you think about that, Sam? Doug and Sam session on one of the next fundraisers. You're muted.
Sorry, I was speaking into a mute. Yeah, I think this is an opportunity to disagree well and to show whether or not I am disagreeing well or disagreeing poorly. And I'm very willing to be that guinea pig. And so I flagged that disagreement last week. I said, hey, you know, there's a fundamental disagreement. This word disagreement is a trigger word for Doug. He doesn't want to use it. And I can get that. There's a lot of negative implications to it. But on the other hand, disagreement as a term, as a word, is understood by almost everyone. So it's a common notion that whether or not you like it or not, you know, is in use. And I'd like to move us beyond the emotional triggers of the word into what can we possibly do to model, whether it's misunderstanding or disagreement or misalignment, you know, whatever you want to call it. And how do we do it well so that we both benefit? So maybe others can also benefit by our actions, if not just by the, you know, minimization of negative energy, if some people are sensitive to that. Okay. And perhaps we can, you know, come up with a better understanding, both of us, for what triggered that conversation. And maybe that might be useful to others. So I'm more than on board with that. So Colin, Glenn, if you guys want to set that up, or if you guys want to pitch the idea and then, you know, see whether or not Doug's on board.
How about that for, yeah.
Yeah, no,
I would love
totally
that.
for that. I've suggested it a few times. I think it is also has been suggested in another format about the videos between Sam, Tammy, and Doug about what's the purpose of the videos and what's the intention, how we're going to make them private, public. Another one I've had is around the word experiment/game. You know, when I say what I'm doing is a game, people are offended. I say, well, would it make it any more justifiable if I said it's an experiment? And then, you know, it's not really well defined. And so, you know, some people have to say, well, I'm looking for the essence of what's going on. You know, you have to change your language because people don't like the word game or they don't like the word experiment. So, you know, you really have to make a mini movie and say, this is kind of what I'm doing. Use, you know, very simple language. And I think through example of these disagreements, we can get somewhere. It's like, so let's pick some words that are contention points and find how to bring the good intention, the coexistence, so that people can co-evolve together. And I think, you know, these tools to get over the hurdles, really, these disagreement hurdles, because it's pretty obvious that everything isn't going to go smoothly when you get into something. There's going to be misunderstandings, there's going to be disagreements, and there's going to be relearning, even for culture and for generations. Like the way they used to do things aren't the way we do things today. And what are we leaving our children and, you know, grandchildren, and what new things do we have to learn now to get up to speed? And that's that new way of doing things people are talking about. But you can't just, you know, sit around and think about it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreement and a lot of need for tools to help align people to pleasantly get through these disagreements. It's almost like, oh, look, we found a disagreement. How are we going to get past this? Let's pull out the ABC machine and let's see what color you got. Okay, I got this color. Okay, that means we got to roll the dice this many times. Okay, now we any farther down the road. Oh, this is great. This is great. Now I understand what you mean. Like a format, a model, tools, you know. And I think the conversations we have could also have a framework to them. One of the ones I've mentioned is where the people who know why they've come to the meeting and want to contribute are kind of have the stage. So Sam's suggesting, Glenn, that you might have the stage, or Alex, and the other people are kind of in the fishbowl to ask questions and focus on what it is you're talking about. Maybe the Saturday could be the meeting where we bring the larger gains and wins to the meeting to say, oh, we had that meeting with Glenn on Wednesday and you can see it here. And we had, you know, the thing with Alex is moving forward. So this is more, that's what I thought that barn raising was going to be in the original. So I'm used to project meetings. I'm used to agile. I'm used to iterative thinking. I'm used to, you know, some clear focus and then go out and dream up some answers and then come back and have with some clearer focus, not just always dreaming. So I think what's coming out of it for me is what Sam is talking about, me to take the responsibility, maybe have some of these interviews with people. I did one with Glenn. Maybe Glenn, you can talk about how that went with you, the game of discernment, because that's a lot of what I'm talking about here. That's an early beta version of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was very fun.
Could we use something like that for Doug and Sam is what I guess, you know, that's what
yeah, and you know, I would really love if we have like one person or two people having the center of attention, and then the rest of us really listening in and asking questions, so that it's this continuous feedback. And if we can have these two people at the center, and then they explore this word, for example, disagreement, which for me also is somewhat unclear, because I wonder, does it mean that, you know, you don't accept the other person's point of view? Is it that you disagree on a specific decision on something that has real life impact? That seems like a very different thing. And so to figure those things out, yeah, that would be very, very interesting. And then we could have, like, let's say Doug and Sam. Yeah, what you want?
Yeah, how you doing, Joshua? One of the things I've thought about is, if I did that, I would like to have like maybe a 15-minute with Sam and a 15-minute with Doug ahead of time, just to put the game pieces in play in a nice spot where it could save a lot of time, and people would be more aligned for the agenda of what's going to happen, because it would be a continuous thing. It could be a continuous thing, or it might just be a one-session thing. But I find in order to make the map, you first have to do the investigation of requirements gathering. You know, what kind of a map are we building? You know, what kind of tools are we going to need on this map? And can we put in the knowns and mark out the unknowns and then start the game?
My thought to that, Colin, is last week there was already a pretty good 2 or 3 minute segment that sort of very explicitly clarified the disagreement that Doug and I had around this word disagreement.
I agree.
So it may not be necessary to do any additional prep work for that conversation. Although I would say if you wanted to do it, I would, go along. But I would like for that prep work, one-on-one or whatever, to also be shared globally. So it's, available as context for whatever happens. That's my only other thought. Over.
Yeah, I do think that the prep work would be in what I've seen is, find out that there's a map to be made, so there's a conversation, and then go get some data listening to put onto the map, which you say is a lot of it's available now. And then the next thing is to get the buy-in of the people who are going to have the conversation. So that would be more of the 15 minutes of saying, maybe the guys don't need to have an introduction to what's going to happen, but I think if we didn't do it all off the cuff, so even if we did do the preparation, so we're getting ready for an event is what I see. So just a little bit of preparation for the event. So this is the data I had. This is how I plan on presenting it. This is the main part of the tape. We'll play the tape. We'll play 3 or 4 minutes of the tape. Then we'll see if people agree that this is where the nodes belong on the map. That would be the 15 minutes or so prep work that, you would verify that I got what you said right before I show it. And we spend the first 30 minutes of the meeting correcting what, we could have done 15 minutes ahead of time. So it's a lot of verification going on, I think. A lot of steel manning, because misunderstanding, I think, is the virus in the system.
Well, there's a lot of good that can come out of a disagreement, especially when you dig into it. And if you have a way of rewarding people that are confident by pressing a button, I'm not talking about a like button, I'm talking about a button that zaps their chair. That'd be fun.
I think there's
less than 5.
I think there could be, if you're saying some entertainment value here, definitely there could be some enjoyment, but I definitely think there's a more mature way to go about things, and I think we've had a disagreement that I felt was very immature. So, Sam has asked if we would revisit that one, and I don't know if we actually could. We tried, and I'm willing just to say, let bygones be bygones. I don't want to deal with it.
Well, for the record, the whole Esteban incident is still, in my mind, unconcluded. And so we've not yet done a responsible closure for the Esteban incident, in my mind. For the record.
That's another one. So that's a secondary one. So yeah, there's this idea of disagreeing and having tools to disagree also, and I think that's my main point. You can put out a game and say, let's play this game, but if somebody doesn't want to play it, are they just going to knock the table over, or are they just going to say yes, no? I don't think so. So that's the deal. If people aren't willing to be responsible to have that open mind, then they've just come to hear themselves speak, I think, a lot of times.
Well, there's other factors to consider, like how would we most want to leverage the other participants other than the two, disagreeers, the protagonists. Like, for example, do you want the audience, I would actually be open to this myself, to be observing and saying, oh, well, this is a good response to this disagreement, or no, this was actually a bad response, and I would have done it this other way. There's all kinds of ways that we could actually involve third parties in this conversation. Maybe all of that can be done in a wrap up, at the end, so it's not real time. But there's no reason why it couldn't be done well in real time as we design this quote unquote game, or as we understand this process.
Yeah, you got the right idea. And I think to put the mindset forward, it's almost like it has to not be on Saturday and it has to not be on Sunday, where everybody has expectations of what's supposed to happen, because the maps or the context tools are distracting. And that's why I say it's kind of nice to know what the context is before you start, because it's no time to have a tutorial at the beginning. People should kind of know why they're there. So
for the record, I have no issue with it being on a Sunday.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it shouldn't be on, unless people understand that they're not going to come and somebody comes another 5 minutes and say, oh, we're not supposed to do that here. Oh, we're not, so maybe that's why I think we need some examples of doing it successfly for other people to buy into a new thing.
A 10-minute or 5-minute introduction to what's going on, and then whoever's there is there, and then we close off the session for any new participants.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think Heiner had a good fishbowl experience, and you got the map ready. And definitely people could, in real time, if you laid down those expectations that they were going to work positively with the syntax and understanding, then they can, Twitter's a back channel. We have chats. People can, you can have a couple data butlers working the map. So you can have, I think moderators is where that comes into play, to get the comments on the map. So, Doug says something, all of a sudden there's 3 comments underneath what he said, Yeah. And, so that could definitely happen.
Okay. So let me just note for the record that we're about 7 or 8 minutes before the top of the hour. I want to express my appreciation for those of you who listened generously and interacted generously to the thoughts I presented in the first hour of this session. Thank you very much. I want to note for the record that we took an action that Glenn will have part of next Saturday's session to do an exposition of his ideas. Colin, you can optionally take some time that session or a future session also if you like. And with that, I'm more or less using that as my closeout. What about the rest of you guys?
Yeah, I just want to say, I love this session, and love the documents you created, and very interesting process we had where you wrote down notes while the rest of us had a lively discussion, and some ideas came in real time into the map from that. So so I can prepare something for next Saturday, and that will be fun. I'll see where I go, but yeah, definitely. And And yeah, Dave, unfortunately, you haven't had time to speak. I would love to hear a few words from you at least. But yeah, this obviously we've touched upon many themes today. With Sam going through many of his ideas of collaborology and community of impact, you could say so. And then we've been discussing various issues. So, but I think it's very fruitful for me just to show up here because it's stimulating and it helps me understand more and I get new perspectives. So even if I'm not necessarily doing anything very specific besides showing up every now and then, that's actually very important for me. And I think there's a mapping out of an idea space which is happening along with this, which is very interesting. And I think it's already showing up. So we should continue it. I really love this idea of more specific, with a session with Doug and Sam, for example. It sounds very, very interesting. If you have a few data butlers who can put that in, I mean, then we would really have a good system. So, everything Colin brings, it's good ideas. We should really do it. Yeah. So, yeah, good session today. Thanks to everyone.
I'll check out with my agreement. I've got to do a write-up now about something I mentioned early on in the session. So when I watch the replay, I'll have a closer idea. But I've got a vague idea. And the other thing, the Esteban incident was when I arrived upon late. But the interactions I had with Esteban after that were interesting. And I uncovered him trying to use child psychology on me. And I taught him a lesson. Well, I think I taught him a lesson. But then again, I might not have. Over.
I don't hear Dave responding to your request, Glenn. Did you want to say something, Dave?
No, I got nothing to add.
You're a great listener.
Dave, at some point, not necessarily today, but at some point, to understand what you're getting out of these sessions that compels you to come back time after time? Or is it just, why do they keep doing this? Even if it's that.
I think I'm similar to Anna. I'm here for the connection, interaction, get to know people, and I don't have a particular agenda or project or experiment at the moment. Maybe I'm looking for something to spark my interest. I haven't seen anything yet that compels me to want to be a part of it, but maybe I'm waiting for that spark to happen.
Okay, appreciate that response. Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that is very good to say. Part of this group is having a place where we can have a little bit of hope that things can be better. And how do you build that? And, Sam's got a lot of commitment, and that's why this group is still here. I don't know how much longer he's going to be here. It's going on 2 years now, I think, isn't it? Is it 2 years? You just had a 2-year celebration?
Barn raising, yeah, for GCC, yes. But barn raising itself wasn't really constituted until several months after that. So, I don't know, maybe a year and a half.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I do see that there's multiple areas. And if we can have a vision of, what it is where this diversity can really be stronger so that people aren't misunderstanding each other. And, a community has a lot of different people in it. And you have to, that's the coexistence part. I think it's a very interesting experiment to not have too many rules and to find the essence of what's going on. And my contribution is trying to find the context of certain focuses and what's your focus. And, very much like you, Dave, nothing in particular has struck what I want to do, but more meta, how to have better conversations and track them so that you can recognize and follow up. And I must say, Joshua has been a lot of help with that. As soon as a spark happens, Joshua has been a signal creator. He's got different tools to help people signal each other, but you have to be committed, make the micro agreements, make the agreements, and then follow up on a project. I'm still getting some updates from Basecamp that I haven't deleted yet. So, you know, but I don't think much is happening there. So it's a matter of commitment, and having a good vision of what's going on is what you need in order to understand what you're committing to. And for those people that have a quest and a burning thing that they're trying to do, I would think that, you know, this finding better ways to have conversations is one for me. So that's why I'm trying to find ways to experiment that. So I guess that's what I'm going to be doing if I follow through. And also building memory trails like Sam's doing in these maps. I think that we can have like a linear memory of these meetings in a graphical format where you can click on it, go see the video, click on it, you know, in one of these maps. Just a very one-dimensional line sort of map of the history of the programming. And, you know, I'm thinking all these things that we do can sprout off of that map to a certain degree. But don't worry about the map so much, worry about what our intentions are. So if we're going to have like a small survey, that was mentioned, Josh, I think in the PKE, that survey really helped at the beginning. So if we had a small survey, Glenn said that he's going to start, you know, we're going to start branching out and letting people have some focus. So if Glenn wants to bring mini deep dives, is that right, Sam? Is that kind of the idea? So once somebody knows what they want to say and they got 7 to 10 sentences, take 15 minutes to a half hour and go into it and try to move it forward, that would be very, very, I think, very productive. And one-on-ones, not necessarily on Saturdays. I think that's what I heard. But yeah, I think that would help a lot. And the other days, like Sunday, can still be about unblocking and take that, you know, the heavier. If this is the yin, then that show can be the yang more. You know, that's the way I see the balance. This show's more about updating what people are trying to do to move forward, and the Sunday show is about what's blocking you up from getting there. And it, you know, and how do we do that without making too many rules in a community way is this huge challenge here. So I think commitment, micro agreements, and focus, and being clear about what you bring, I think is the key to me. So, and I think Sam's doing a great job building these outlines to keep us focused. So if I had one request is that we do have more of a format to what the topic is and how we're going to follow through, and, you know, split the 2 hours up into 4 30-minute segments or something. I don't know. Kind of move forward that way. Something. Whoops, hit the wrong button. Okay, you're good.
Colin. Anyone else want to opt in? Hey, Josh.
I'm just saying hello and goodbye, and thank you for holding a meeting on Saturday. And just wanted to share with the group that I've been working with the new website builder for Google. So if you have a free Gmail account, you have a new free website builder that's upgraded. So you can add all the forms and Excel spreadsheets and everything. It's pretty powerful, really awesome, and it's free.
Is it
so
the
just
latest
wanted to put that out there if anyone wants. Yeah, the latest Google website builder. They did a lot of advancements to it, so you can make. What's that?
Is it called Sites? SITES?
Correct. Yes, okay. That is what it's called. And works really well. And at one point during the GCC, I did make a like global challenges collaboration at Gmail, a super long email address. So I'm happy to give that to the group so that can move stuff over to that. And then it has a great collaboration feature too. So you can collaborate before you publish. I thought that was nice, and a really good menu system. So it's a lot better. It's not perfect, but I'm going to stop donating my $30 a month for the WP Engine site so that it can get moved over just to save $30 since it's not really active at the moment. So just want to signal that to the group.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. Anyone else with a wrap up? Going once, going twice. sold. Thanks all. Next time.